I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I will open tonight's meeting and ask everyone from the board if anybody has any public comment.
I just wanted to mention that the pancake breakfast will be held tomorrow morning at the senior center, and they're selling May baskets already. So you can have May baskets for Easter if you want.
Oh, a month in advance. Anybody else? I just want to announce once again that the Boys and Girls Club is going to have the Are You Smarter Than Our Sixth Graders on Friday, March 27th at the Lunenburg High School Auditorium. The doors open at 6 p.m. Game starts at 6:30 p.m. and the admission is a donation at the door. And for those who don't know, it is a special live game show event where teams of local contestants battle wits against each other with help from our sixth grade members. So it's kind of a blend between Jeopardy and Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? They're still looking for people to sponsor the event in all forms of donations, everything from $10 to sponsor a question, you can sponsor sixth graders, you can sponsor a team, all the way up to corporate levels. So you can find more information about it at www.bgcluboflunenburg.org. Also, this coming Monday, March 16th, there is the Citizens Party Caucus of the town of Lunenburg, which will be held at the Turkey Hill Middle School cafeteria. Does not give a time here. Do we know the time? Is it 7? 7, okay. At 7 p.m. I will announce here the offices to be filled. These are for elected terms. Moderator for 3 years. Selectmen for 3 years. 2 Board of Health members for each for 3 years. Board of Assessor for 3 years. 2 Sewer Commissioners for 3 years. School Committee member for 3 years. A Park Commissioner for 3 years and a Park Commissioner for 1 year. Commissioner of Trust Funds for 3 years. Cemetery Commissioner for 3 years. 3 Library Trustees for 3 years and 1 Library Trustee for 1 year. Planning Board member for 5 years. Planning Board member for 2 years, and a Planning Board member for 1 year. Sale on Planning Board members, I guess. And a Housing Authority member for 5 years. So if you are interested in any of these, if you are not familiar with the caucus, you can get nominated at the caucus. If the caucus elects you, you do not have to fill out papers to run. If you do not go to the caucus or do not win at the caucus, then you will have to take out papers and get signatures of registered voters by the date that will be discussed at the caucus. I don't know the exact deadline for signing papers, but it'll be, I'm assuming, sometime near the beginning or into April. So please, we need people to run. These are a lot of positions. How many did you count, Jamie?
22.
22 positions. So it's a rather heavy year this year. So again, that's this coming Monday at the Turkey Hill Middle School cafeteria at 7 p.m. Any public comment from the public this evening? Seeing none. So, a discussion and the appointment of a cable advisory committee.
So I can give you a quick update regarding what's happened since your last meeting. I did send an email to the 3 members of the Public Access Cable Committee, and 2 of them have responded that they are interested in serving on the Cable Advisory Committee. So I think those 2 and the 3 of you who indicated your interest here would make a 5-member committee, so that would be a good committee. I did a good number on the committee. I did find out who at Kopelman and Page deals with cable license negotiations. We've exchanged, it's not an attorney we've worked with before. His name is Bill Hewig. We've exchanged a number of voicemail messages, but have not been able to connect. So he knows what our timetable is, and he's assisted communities in negotiating licenses in the past. So I think it probably makes sense for us to plan to work with town council through the process. But I don't have answers to any of the questions that were raised last week because I haven't had a chance to connect with him. So we can put this on again for next week to get answers to those questions. But I think if you're prepared to make the appointments tonight, you could do that.
I mean, there's nothing he's potentially going to say that's going to change the composition of the committee, right?
No,
Okay,
no.
so then we could,
So
the committee.
the two members from PAC that are interested are Rhonda Lizio and Steve Walker.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we nominate Rhonda and Steve from the PAC, Tom, Paula, and Jamie from the Board of Selectmen to make the committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in
Sounds
favor, please say
perfect.
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, so that is the 5. If we can just send an email to everybody.
I will do
Created a
that.
new committee.
Excuse me?
We created a new committee and we filled the vacancies immediately.
There you go.
We'll take successes
Okay, yes.
when we can.
Yeah.
Star on the town hall refrigerator. Discuss and review the FY16 budget. Anybody have any comments about that? I will mention that a couple of us were there at the FinCom on Thursday to see, or several of us, I guess, to see the library budget presentation, Council on Aging, and the schools. So, those, I mean, 2 of them are on the smaller end, one of them, the school, of course, on the larger end of budget size. Everybody did a good presentation. I don't know if anybody here has any comment or question or anything about that. I guess not.
You know, one thing we didn't talk about last week is the governor did release his budget. And I guess maybe that was before your meeting. We didn't talk about it at the Finance Committee meeting. And I'm sure anybody who's interested has read newspaper articles and knows that cities and towns generally did well in the governor's budget. There were a couple of things that were interesting. The Chapter 70 allocation, the governor's budget increased over the current year by 2.4%. I had carried 2% in the budget recommendation. The governor's budget increased the unrestricted general government aid by 3.6%, and I hadn't included anything, so that was significant. And the governor's budget also included the 40S payment, which I'm not sure if that will stay or not. You know, it may be that the governor's staff wasn't completely knowledgeable about what that was, because that is an annual application process, and it's not necessarily the same amount year after year, or an amount inflated for cost of living or anything like that. So I'm not sure if that will stay. The charges, the cherry sheet charges overall were either about what we were expecting. The choice tuition, which is an issue for us this year, is carried at the same higher level in next year's budget. That was something that was taken into account when I put the budget together, so that's not an issue for us. I think the biggest issue is that we're not necessarily going to see anything else from the state before we have to make a decision on what gets presented at town meeting here. So I think there probably will be some substantial discussion, particularly about that 40S payment, whether or not we're going to include that. It's not included in mine. The health insurance renewal, I know I sent you some information. That was an increase of 10.9%. I had projected 7, so that is some additional costs. And we don't yet have even a preliminary assessment from Monty Tech. They are presenting to the Finance Committee on Thursday night, so I expect that we'll receive that on Thursday night, but probably not before. At this point, I think we are, based on the enrollment data that they shared, I think we have an issue of about $48,000, where the assessment's going to be probably $48,000 higher than what is in the preliminary budget at this point. And I also have heard that the regional school districts didn't do as well under the governor's budget as cities and towns, but I haven't been able to figure out what that means yet. So I think we'll hear about that Thursday night. So it may be that the delta between what is in my recommendation and what Monty Tech gives us as a preliminary assessment is even a little bit higher than the $47,000.
Do you want to mention anything about the FEMA application for the snow and ice and the state's approach to trying to treat all 4 storms as one?
Yeah, I can do that. So the first storm, the blizzard that we had in January, that has been certified. There were costs expended within the different counties to reach the threshold for FEMA to participate in reimbursement. So that, but then we had 3 other big storms, and what MEMA has asked is for all of the cities and towns to compile their costs for all 4 storms, but to itemize them by storm. And they have been submitted to FEMA for consideration of being reimbursed really for the winter season, for that 30 or so days. That is unusual because we usually look at particular events, but what MEMA is putting forth is we had the first one and we never had the opportunity to recover, and it was just one storm after another. So the total costs that we incurred for those 4 storms were about $300,000. So we potentially are eligible for up to 75% reimbursement of that $300,000 if FEMA buys into the
4-storm
the
approach.
The 4-storm approach. There's also, the governor also filed legislation which would allow cities and towns to amortize the cost over 2 years. And it really would be, we already have the ability to carry the deficit into fiscal 16, so it's really, the way I read it was, it almost looked like it was 17 and 18, which that's a long time.
Yeah.
So, you know, that, I suppose it's helpful, but I don't think that's anything that we would propose to you as a reasonable solution.
It's just kicking the can down the road, really.
Right, there's
And not knowing what next year's going to bring.
Well, it's marginally helpful. I mean, it is helpful if you know, if we were hit with an outlandish number that there's no way we could possibly cover in 1 year, it would be helpful. You know, we could cover it here. It would hurt going into FY16, but, you know, you're right. Given the number, what our number is looking like from the town manager, I wouldn't propose that we would, even if it was afforded us, I don't think we'd use it because we don't gain anything except just carrying the cost across multiple years. So.
On the 40S component, I don't know how the state arrived at the number within that line item that they've proposed, but I'm assuming there's some type of formula that we apply when we submit the application. Can we extrapolate from what they approved last year to what that number is estimated to be this year?
Well, there is a formula. I know the components of the formula. They were explained to me. I haven't seen the formula. And we can't right now because they're based on, what we would be eligible to receive in 16 is based on actual 15 expenditures. And we don't necessarily have all of that data. So I'm not sure. I mean, if we had the formula, I think we could do something.
And we can't get the formula?
Well, I've asked for the formula.
They don't give you the formula.
They will. They will, but I don't have it yet.
Okay.
It's the secret formula.
So,
I'm glad the town manager is hopeful as acknowledging we will. I'll be just to counterbalance it. I don't think we will. Because they don't give us any formula. Anytime you ask about any kind of school spending, they don't give it to you. 40S calculation, they're not going to give it to you. Because then they can't do whatever they do behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
Well, it's
We
so
don't rea-
predictable if they give you the formula.
We don't even know about meals tax, right? How they calculate meals tax.
No, we know how they calculate
Yeah,
it. We just don't, we don't have any way of tracking whether the number they give us
Right,
is
and what the
accurate.
businesses are and what the percentages are.
This is a number, just
Yeah,
take the envelope.
yeah,
Take the
yeah.
envelope.
So, but one last thing on the 40S. The 16 budget recommendation has the 15 40S payment in it because we, under the proposal that I put together, we would take that same amount
Okay,
from
so
free
you
cash.
anticipated the same.
I did.
Okay,
But this,
okay.
now the governor has another payment in that I didn't anticipate. So we potentially have 2 payments available to us in one fiscal year. So if there's discussion about using 2 in one fiscal year, one of them should be for capital or one-time expenses, non-recurring.
A non-recurring expense, right,
Non-recurring,
right.
It can't be built into the base
Right.
going
Right.
forward because we're going to create a hole.
Exactly.
And you've worked it out now that we, at least potentially, will be getting it, because this kind of surprises that we got it, and certainly when we got it this year, and actually penalized us a bit, we won't be falling into that, right? The way you've addressed it this year?
Right, if we use the prior year to fund the following year.
Okay.
Right, but if we use both, then we're not going to have something for 17.
I just don't want the same thing that happened in the fall, that we're faced with that again. Okay, minutes. They were here somewhere. Minutes from October 7th. Warrants. Payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $487,168.37. Payroll in the amount of $705,849.91. And accounts payable in the amount of $386,626.77. Action file issues. Any action file issues? Okay, committee reports. Now, we have a 7:30 joint meeting with the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission and people from the DPW to talk about draft village district bylaw and stormwater management. That is due to begin at 7:30. That will not be on camera. So with that, that was my intent of bringing that up so that we have on-time committee reports.
Or you want to carry them both? This is two.
So, Board of Health,
No reports since the last meeting.
building reuse,
No report. Next meeting is the 18th of this month.
capital planning, no.
No report.
Finance committee,
As mentioned last week, they reviewed the Lunenburg Public Schools, the Senior Center, Council on Aging, and the library. And this coming Thursday, they'll review the DPW and Monty Tech.
excellent. Do we, while we're here, it is on the website, it's been on Facebook and other places, but the library is now open. Are they open their normal hours with restrictions in certain locations because of the damage? Or are they, okay, so just, all right, so they're open their normal hours now. And there's just some areas that you may not be able to get to while the final replacement and cleanup is done. Library Board of Trustees,
No report?
MPO,
Meeting tomorrow.
Planning Board.
The meeting of the planning board last night focused mainly on the village district bylaw. There was a lot of discussion. Number of citizens participated in that discussion and raised questions or concerns or requested clarification. Members of the historical commission were there as well to talk about the APD. So the planning board went through the bylaw, made some changes, and actually voted last evening on the bylaw itself. One of the largest changes was the allowance of single-story construction, new single-story construction on parcels over 5 acres. So at the end of the meeting, there was a lot of dialogue about whether or not, in the past, it's been talked about tying the two articles together, the article related to the village center district bylaw and the architectural preservation bylaw that's proposed. And last night, there was some discussion about whether or not the entire planning board was in support of that. There was no decision made on that particular topic. And Jamie and Bob were there as well, so they can chime in as well. So tonight, we are meeting with the planning board to talk about the village center district bylaw, and go into that. But the planning board last night did vote to make the changes that were discussed last evening. The other thing that was interesting last night in the committee reports, Ken Shennis giving his MJTC report, talked about his participation on the MJTC, and he specifically talked about
If you could tell people what the MJTC is.
Montechusett Joint Transportation Commission. He is our representative for the town of Lunenburg. And in looking at the regional transportation plan, he spoke on behalf of Lunenburg, advocating an increase in Chapter 90 funding, as well as incorporating into the requirements for roadways funding a road preservation component. And this board knows in the past, we've talked about reconstruction such as Summer Street, and we've talked about Chase Road, but there's an entire process for road reconstruction versus road preservation. Because what's happening in many communities, I think across the Commonwealth, is roadways are deteriorating, and the process of getting additional funding or federal aid to pay for those repairs is very difficult, because you have to show that it's a road reconstruction versus a preservation. So Ken is advocating for that, and actually a number of the communities joined into that discussion and support his recommendations. So that was great that he's actively advocating on behalf of Lunenburg. The planning board is planning to meet with the historical commission on the APD Thursday evening. They're having a workshop. There were a couple members from the planning board and a couple members from the historical commission that are going to work on fine-tuning and crafting the APD, because they know the wording is due for the warrant by the 23rd. So I don't know if either of you want to chime in on last night's meeting.
I'd just say that on the planning board's webpage, on the town's website, under the directors page, which is on the planning board website, is the Village Center District bylaw draft, the map, and the Architectural Preservation District draft bylaws. I encourage everybody to go there who has computer access. And I'll note that what Mrs. Bertram said about the question of whether they're going to be tied together or not. I'm very concerned that if they are not, that the implementation of the Village Center District would decimate the historic district based on the broad openings that the district is intended to provide, that without a historic preservation component. And that if the Architectural Preservation District is not ready for town meeting, then I would recommend that we consider postponing it to the fall town meeting. I think it's that important. I have hope that the two committees will come up with an agreement on the agricultural, Architectural Preservation District.
I would agree with both Mr. Ebersol and Mrs. Bertram's assessment of what happened last night, but I'd like to emphasize that I believe the village district bylaw is important enough and critical enough to be of beneficial to the town that we should move forward as soon as possible. I do agree that perhaps that will require us to put quite a bit of effort into making sure that the protections of the historical piece and the architectural piece are done, but done in time to move forward and not cause undue delay.
I should mention that the draft that's proposed by the planning board actually has a delay component built into it, because the APD as recommended right now requires the creation of a committee to review applications and to issue permits. And because that needs to be in place in order to move forward with some of the permitting requirements under the planning board Village Center District bylaw, there is a delay, and it's January of 2016, I believe. I don't have it right in front of me. But there is a delay component built in, and there is actually a reference to having to comply with the APD requirements. But there was some dialogue last night, as to how do you comply with something that doesn't exist, and we're adopting a bylaw for something that does not yet exist. But again, the planning board did not vote. That was a discussion that they began last night. As an individual, and I do think it's something we need to talk about as a board, but as an individual, I support both bylaws. I think that they're both important. But because of the potential destruction of historical properties in the center, I'm very concerned about moving forward without at least some type of preservation bylaw in place.
Okay. PAC.
No further. They talked about their budget on last night. I don't know if they finalized that.
School committee?
School committee. The school committee met. There was a presentation by the School Calendar Advisory Committee on adolescent sleep requirements, explaining that research shows that adolescents should start their day later, and they are contemplating beginning the start of school at 8:30 when the new school opens, and then switching that to 9 when the fields are ready and they can have adequate lighting. The issue with that is, do the younger kids go earlier? Does everybody start at the same time? What are the transportation cost issues that bring up? So it's really just something that they're still thinking about. There's going to be a workshop this Thursday at Passios to discuss the one-on-one computer initiative and the process to be used in naming the new school. And there's going to be a televised school budget hearing on Wednesday, April 1st at Town Hall. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that Carrie and I met with the MART people this morning, and we should be ready for next week's meeting to have the final routing and price.
Excellent. School building committee meets tomorrow. Sewer commission.
No further reports since last week.
Town manager reports. No reports. By some miracle, look at that. 7:30. So before we go off the air, because we're going to be meeting, as I said earlier, with the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and DPW about the Village District bylaw and then stormwater management. Before we do that, any final public comment from the board? Any final public comment from the public? We will be meeting next week, which is St. Patrick's Day. Same time and same location. And with that, I will sign off from TV, and we will go into our workshop meeting, which is still open to the public, of course, but just won't be televised. So, good night.